Before I begin this story, let me ask you something. Have you ever been underestimated, mistreated, or pushed aside just because of who you are? If yes, then this story will hit home. Stay with me until the end, because what starts as a tale of prejudice will turn into one of the most unforgettable lessons about life, justice, and regret. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe, because we tell real, emotional, life-changing stories that will inspire you and keep you glued from start to finish. The small town of Fairview loved its basketball. On Friday nights, the gymnasium became the heartbeat of the community. Families filled the bleachers, cheerleaders waved pom-poms, and the marching band thundered out songs that echoed across the court. In a town with little else to celebrate, basketball wasn't just a game. It was a way of life. And for Jamal Carter, it was more than that. Basketball was his dream, his escape, and his future. Jamal Carter was the kind of boy who carried both hope and hunger in his chest. At 16, he stood taller than most kids his age. His frame lean but wiry, built from endless hours of running drills in the park and pushing his body against limits no one asked him to. The cracked concrete court at the edge of his neighborhood had long since become his sanctuary. Long after the sun dipped behind the rooftops, when the streetlights buzzed and the air grew damp with evening, Jamal would still be there, dribbling until his palms ached, shooting until his arms grew heavy, sweating as if he were fighting the world itself. His mother, Angela, often came home from her late shift at the diner and saw him through the dusty window. She would sigh, exhausted from serving coffee and pie to half the town, but pride always softened her face. She knew why he pushed himself that hard. Jamal wasn't just playing basketball. He was building a door out of the life they lived. A life where rent was always due and secondhand shoes were the only option. "You keep going like that, baby, you'll run yourself into the ground," she would warn gently. And Jamal, drenched in sweat, would look up at her with fire in his eyes. "Mama, one day this game's gonna change everything for us. You'll see." Angela wanted to believe it. She really did. But she also knew the world could be cruel, especially to boys like Jamal. Fairview High School was the town's pride. On Friday nights, the whole community packed into the gym, shouting, stomping, and chanting as if those games were life and death. The team's coach, Richard Miller, was a man woven into the fabric of Fairview itself. In his 50s, with a hard jaw and piercing eyes, he'd been coaching for decades. People admired him, trusted him, even worshipped him in some ways. To the town, Miller was more than a coach. He was the guardian of tradition, the man who had shaped boys into men and champions. But behind the clipped speeches and handshakes, Miller carried his own quiet prejudice, buried so deep most never noticed. When he looked at Jamal, he didn't see the hours of dedication or the boy's gift for the game. He saw a stereotype: athletic but undisciplined, flashy but not trustworthy, quick but careless. It didn't matter how many shots Jamal sank at practice, how many times he outplayed his teammates. Miller's mind was already made up. The first game of the season arrived like a storm. The gymnasium roared with energy, the bleachers trembling with stamping feet and shouted chants. Parents waved banners, kids cheered, the air thick with the smell of popcorn and sweat. Jamal sat at the edge of the bench, lacing his sneakers tighter, his chest thrumming like a drum. He had dreamed of this moment for years, the chance to prove himself under the bright lights. But when the announcer called out the starting lineup, his name wasn't there. Confusion twisted in his stomach. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe coach would call him in as soon as the game tipped off. But as minutes ticked by, Jamal remained glued to the bench. "Coach," he whispered desperately when Miller passed by. "Why ain't I in?" Miller didn't meet his eyes. "You're not ready yet," he muttered, eyes fixed on his clipboard. Not ready. Jamal's heart sank. He had outworked everyone on that team. How could he not be ready? On the court, the Falcons stumbled. Shots clanged off the rim, passes went wild, defense crumbled. The crowd groaned louder with every mistake. A man in the bleachers shouted, "Put Carter in. Let the boy play." Others echoed him. But Miller stood arms crossed, jaw tight, unmoved. The final buzzer sounded on a brutal loss. Jamal hadn't stepped onto the court once. He trudged home that night under the buzzing streetlights, his bag dragging on his shoulder. Angela met him at the door, her tired eyes searching his face. "Baby, what happened?" His throat burned. "Coach says I'm not ready." She pulled him into her arms, but her embrace couldn't stop the ache in his chest. The weeks that followed became a painful rhythm. Practice, Jamal dazzled. He sprinted harder, passed sharper, shot cleaner. His teammates knew it, the assistant coach knew it, even the students watching from the sidelines knew it. "Man, why won't he play you?" one boy asked after practice. Jamal just shook his head, though inside anger boiled. He knew why. He saw it in the way Coach Miller looked at him, not as a player but as a problem waiting to happen. Behind closed doors, Miller's words proved it. One evening, after the gym had emptied, he sat in his office with assistant coach Reynolds. "That Carter kid's got flash, sure," Miller said, sipping his coffee. "But I don't trust him. Players like that, they burn bright and burn out. No discipline." Reynolds frowned. "With all due respect, coach, he's the best talent we've got. He could change this season for us." Miller's eyes hardened. "Talent doesn't win games. Trust does. And I can't build trust on kids who'll end up distracted or in trouble." The words hung in the room, thick and bitter. What Miller didn't know was that the janitor sweeping nearby had heard every word. The old man shook his head, muttering under his breath, "One day, coach, that boy's gonna make you eat them words." Meanwhile, Jamal carried the weight of humiliation. Each game night, he sat at the far end of the bench, his legs bouncing with pent-up energy, his chest burning as he watched his team crumble. Parents shouted from the stands, demanding to know why their brightest star never touched the court. But Miller never relented. School whispers followed Jamal. Some kids teased him cruelly. "Guess you ain't as good as you thought, huh?" While others offered pity. None of it made the sting go away. Late one night, Angela found him sitting on the edge of his bed, his basketball resting lifelessly beside him. "Jamal," she said softly, sitting beside him, "don't you let that man decide your worth. God gave you that gift. Don't let anybody bench your dreams." Her words reignited the fire inside him. Jamal doubled down. He woke before dawn to run laps through the neighborhood, his breath clouding in the cold air. He played pickup games at the park against grown men twice his size, learning to hold his ground. He pushed himself harder, faster, sharper, until the ball felt like it lived in his hands. Word spread, Jamal Carter was unstoppable. But still, every Friday night, he sat in silence while his teammates lost game after game. By mid-season, the Falcons' record was in ruins. The town began to grumble. Parents cornered Miller after games, demanding answers. Local reporters started asking pointed questions. One night, after yet another humiliating defeat, Miller stormed into the locker room, face flushed. "You boys don't want it bad enough," he barked. "You don't have the fight." Jamal clenched his fists. His heart hammered in his chest. And then, before he could stop himself, he stood. "We do want it, coach," he said, his voice trembling but steady. "But you won't even give me a chance." The room froze. Every eye turned to him. Miller's face darkened. "Sit down, Carter." But Jamal didn't. He lifted his chin, meeting the man's cold stare. "You're punishing me for something I can't change. And everybody here knows it." Gasps rippled through the locker room. His teammates shifted uneasily. Miller's jaw tightened like stone. "Watch your mouth, boy." The word cut deeper than any blade. Jamal's chest heaved, but he sat down, fury and hurt mixing in his veins. In that moment, the truth was undeniable. This wasn't about basketball. This was about something uglier. And it wasn't going to stop until the truth came out. Jamal didn't sleep that night. He lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling of his room, his fists balled tight under his pillow. The words still echoed in his ears, ugly and heavy, like poison seeping into his veins. Oi. He thought about the way the other players had looked at him, some with pity, some with fear, some with the kind of silent agreement that told him they had seen it all along too. And he thought about his mother, who would tell him not to lose his temper, not to give them what they wanted. But it hurt. God, it hurt. The next morning, Jamal laced up his worn sneakers before the sun had even risen. He ran until his lungs burned, until sweat poured into his eyes, until his body screamed for him to stop. But he wouldn't stop. He couldn't. If Coach Miller wanted to break him, he was going to have to try harder. Days turned into weeks. And though the team kept losing, Miller's stance never wavered. Jamal sat through every game, muscles tight, watching his teammates stumble. Fans grew restless. They weren't blind. They could see Miller had the town's best player shackled to the bench. After one particularly embarrassing loss, a father stormed down from the bleachers. "What's wrong with you, Miller?" he yelled, red-faced. "Why won't you play the Carter boy? You'd rather lose than give him a chance." Miller dismissed him coldly. "I coach this team, not you." But whispers swirled after that night. Reporters pressed harder. Articles began appearing in the local paper, questioning Miller's decisions. Parents muttered about petitions, about forcing the school board to act. Meanwhile, Jamal kept working. If anything, the pressure made him sharper. In the dim light of the street lamps, he practiced crossovers, fadeaways, free throws. He studied film of professional players at the library computers, watching how they moved, how they thought. His game matured, became smarter, stronger. He wasn't just a talented kid anymore. He was a weapon waiting to be unleashed. Yet Miller still kept him caged. One late night, Miller sat in his office long after the gym had emptied. His assistant, Reynolds, lingered at the door. "You're going to lose this town if you keep this up," Reynolds warned quietly. "Everyone sees it. That boy is your answer." Miller slammed his fist against the desk. "I said no. He's not the kind of player I can build around. He doesn't fit. Doesn't fit, or you just don't want him to." Reynolds shot back, his eyes narrowing. Miller's jaw flexed, but he said nothing. Unbeknownst to either of them, Miller's words would soon come back to haunt him in ways he couldn't imagine. The breaking point came at the biggest game of the season. Rivalry night. The stands were packed shoulder to shoulder, the noise deafening. The Falcons were down 10 points at halftime, their offense sputtering, their defense in shambles. The crowd's frustration was boiling. "Play Carter," voices chanted. "We want Carter. We want Carter." Jamal sat at the end of the bench, heart pounding, adrenaline begging him to move. His teammates glanced at him desperately. Even they wanted him in. But Miller stood stiff, arms crossed, ignoring the storm around him. By the final buzzer, the Falcons had been humiliated again. Boos rained down from the bleachers. Parents shouted, reporters crowded forward, microphones shoved in Miller's face. "Coach Miller, why won't you let Jamal Carter play?" one demanded. "He's not ready," Miller said through clenched teeth. "He doesn't have what it takes yet." But the town wasn't buying it anymore. That night, someone leaked a recording. A grainy phone clip of Miller in his office weeks before. His voice clear as day. "I don't trust him. Players like that burn out. They don't last." The clip spread like wildfire. By morning, Fairview was buzzing with outrage. "Players like that?" everyone asked. What exactly did he mean? For Jamal, the scandal was both vindication and fuel. He could feel the tide turning, the world beginning to see the truth he had known all along. But it didn't erase the pain of being held back, of having his dreams suffocated by one man's prejudice. Angela held his hands at the kitchen table that night. "Baby, you keep your head high. Don't let their ugliness make you bitter. Your moment's coming. I can feel it." Jamal nodded, but deep down he wasn't sure if he could wait much longer. The next game was chaos. Reporters lined the bleachers. Parents held signs. "Let Carter play." The chants started before the whistle even blew. Miller looked shaken for the first time all season, sweat glistening on his forehead as the noise swelled around him. Still he held firm. Jamal sat the whole game, his teammates crumbling on the court, the crowd growing furious. When the final buzzer sounded on yet another loss, the gym erupted, not in cheers but in fury. Parents confronted Miller right there on the court. Reporters shoved cameras in his face. Students booed. The gym was a cauldron of anger. That night Miller couldn't sleep. For the first time in years, doubt crept into his mind. Maybe he had gone too far. Maybe this wasn't just about discipline or trust, or whatever excuses he'd fed himself. Maybe deep down, he had let something uglier guide his hand. But by the next morning he buried the thought. Pride was a heavy chain, and Miller wasn't ready to break free of it. Jamal, on the other hand, was done waiting. He doubled down harder than ever. At the park, he played against the toughest competition he could find. Men twice his age, street legends who didn't care about high school politics. Jamal battled them all, earning scars, bruises, and respect. His name began spreading beyond the neighborhood, whispered in gyms and playgrounds in nearby towns. "Kid's a star," people said. "Just wait until he gets his shot." And though Miller kept him shackled, the world was starting to notice. The Falcons, meanwhile, slid deeper into disaster. Loss after loss piled up, the season crumbling. Booster money dried up, fans stopped coming, parents threatened to pull their kids. The once proud program was becoming a laughingstock. The school board called Miller in for a meeting. "You're on thin ice," they warned. "Fix this, or we'll find someone who can." Still Miller resisted. "Carter's not the answer," he insisted. But in his heart he was no longer so sure. The turning point came in the final weeks of the season. Another big game, another packed gym. This time, the Falcons were down 20 at halftime, the crowd restless and angry. Chants of "We want Carter" shook the rafters. Even the players looked at Miller with pleading eyes. Finally, something inside him cracked. His pride battled with his survival. His jaw clenched, his fists tightened, but the weight of the crowd, the board, the press. He couldn't resist anymore. "Carter!" he barked, his voice sharp, almost angry. "Get in there." For a second Jamal froze, not sure he'd heard right. Then his chest surged with adrenaline as he tore off his warm-up and sprinted to the scorer's table. The crowd erupted. The gym shook with cheers. His teammates slapped his back. And Miller, standing stiff on the sidelines, looked like a man being forced to swallow glass. Jamal stepped onto the court, heart hammering, the ball in his hands at last. This was his moment. The one he had been denied for so long. The one he had bled and fought for. The whistle blew, and Jamal showed them all. The first possession came to him quicker than he expected. The ball swung around the arc, and suddenly it was in his hands. The gym seemed to hold its breath. Jamal's defender crouched low, arms wide, a smirk on his face, probably thinking this was just hype, that the bench warmer wasn't all that. Jamal dribbled once, twice. His heartbeat slowed, his instincts took over. In one smooth motion, he crossed left, spun right, and slipped past his defender as if the boy were standing still. Gasps filled the gym. He drove hard to the basket, leapt into the air, and finished with a layup that banked off the glass and dropped clean through the net. The place exploded. Cheers roared, students jumped to their feet. The sound thundered in Jamal's ears. His teammates slapped his back as they ran down the court. Even the referee gave a faint smile. But Jamal wasn't smiling. He was focused, locked in, his eyes burning. This wasn't about one play. This was about proving everything. On defense, he anticipated the pass, jumped the lane, and stole the ball clean. The crowd screamed as he bolted down the court, defenders chasing. He rose high, legs stretching, and slammed the ball through the hoop with a force that rattled the rim. The gym shook. Students chanted his name. "Jamal! Jamal! Jamal!" On the sidelines, Miller's face twitched, torn between pride and resentment. He hadn't wanted this, but he couldn't deny it. The boy was electric. Play after play, Jamal dazzled. Step-back jumpers, lightning passes, fearless drives. The Falcons clawed back, the scoreboard shrinking. His teammates fed off his energy, playing harder, sharper, faster. By the fourth quarter they were within striking distance. The final minute was chaos. The Falcons trailed by 2, the ball in Jamal's hands. The crowd rose to its feet, voices deafening. His defender pressed tight, sweat dripping. Jamal dribbled, eyes locked, the clock ticking down. 10 seconds. He feinted left, drove right, pulled back and launched a shot from beyond the arc. The ball soared, spinning through the air as the buzzer blared. Whish! The gym erupted like an earthquake. Students stormed the court, lifting Jamal onto their shoulders, chanting his name. His teammates shouted, hugging him, celebrating like they'd just won a championship. And Coach Miller. He stood frozen on the sideline, clipboard limp in his hand, eyes hollow. For the first time in his long career, he realized he hadn't been coaching to win. He'd been coaching to protect his own bias. And now the truth was glaring, undeniable, and humiliating. Reporters swarmed Jamal after the game, microphones flashing. "How did it feel to finally get your shot?" one asked. Jamal, sweat dripping, his chest still heaving, said simply, "I was ready the whole time." The quote hit the papers the next day, bold and sharp. It became a rallying cry in town. But as much as that night was a triumph, Jamal knew it was only the beginning. The following games cemented his rise. With Jamal in the lineup, the Falcons transformed. They won game after game, clawing their way back into contention. Jamal was unstoppable. His skill undeniable, his passion contagious. Fans filled the gym again, signs waving, chants echoing. And yet, beneath the cheers, a darker tension brewed. Everyone knew what had kept Jamal benched for so long, even if no one said it outright. Parents whispered in the stands. Students debated in hallways. The town was divided, some still defending Miller as old school, others condemning him as biased. Miller himself lived in torment. Each victory tasted bitter, poisoned by the knowledge that it was Jamal, not his coaching, that had saved the season. He watched the boy's talent blossom, knowing deep down he had tried to bury it. Regret gnawed at him, but his pride kept him silent. One night, long after a triumphant win, Miller sat alone in his office. The gym was quiet, the echoes of celebration long gone. He stared at a photo on the wall, one of his old championship teams, boys smiling, arms draped over each other's shoulders. For years, he had believed he was shaping lives, building character. But now he saw the cracks. Reynolds appeared at the door. "Good game tonight," he said softly. Miller didn't look up. "It wasn't me. It was him." Reynolds crossed his arms. "You could have ruined him. You know that, right? Another kid might have quit. Might have believed your lies." The words cut deep. Miller had no reply. Meanwhile, Jamal's star rose higher. Scouts began appearing in the bleachers, clipboards in hand. Whispers of scholarships filled the air. For Jamal, it was everything he had dreamed of, yet he never forgot the pain of sitting on that bench, invisible and dismissed. One evening after practice, he lingered on the court, shooting free throws under the fading light. Miller approached quietly, his footsteps echoing. "You've been playing well," Miller said awkwardly. Jamal didn't stop shooting. The ball swished clean through the net. "I've always played well." The words landed heavy. Miller shifted uncomfortably, but Jamal didn't look at him. For the first time, Miller realized forgiveness wouldn't come easy, if it came at all. The season ended in glory. The Falcons, once the laughingstock, made an improbable run deep into the playoffs. Jamal was the hero, his name etched into Fairview history. But for Miller, the victories felt hollow. In the quiet of his home, he replayed his choices, the cruelty of his words, the way he had almost destroyed a boy's dream out of prejudice. Sleep eluded him. Regret weighed on him like chains. Jamal, meanwhile, began fielding calls from colleges. His future was opening wide, possibilities stretching before him like a golden road. Yet in his heart, he carried scars that no victory could erase. The town hailed him as a hero, but he knew the truth. He had been forced to fight battles no player should ever have to. And though he had won, the wound still ached. If you're still with me, I know this story has pulled at you. And it's not over yet. The most powerful part is still to come. If you haven't subscribed already, do it now. Stories like this, about pain, triumph, and redemption, are why we're here. Hit subscribe and let's keep going, because the ending of this journey will stay with you forever. Years passed. Jamal left Fairview, carrying his gift to bigger stages. He played in college, dazzling crowds, earning headlines. Angela sat proudly in the stands, tears in her eyes as she watched her son live the dream he had promised her long ago. Fairview never forgot him. His jersey hung in the gym, his name whispered with pride. He had become a symbol, not just of talent but of resilience, of triumph over injustice. And Miller. He remained in town, coaching year after year, though something in him had changed. He was quieter now, less certain, the fire in his eyes dimmed. He still coached, but he never regained the reverence he once held. Parents looked at him differently. Students whispered about his past. He carried the weight of his choices like a shadow he couldn't escape. One crisp autumn night, years after Jamal had left, Miller sat alone in the empty gym. The banners hung above him, the lights casting long shadows. He thought about all the boys who had passed through his program, about the lessons he claimed to teach. And then he thought about Jamal, the boy he had almost broken, the boy who had shown him what true greatness looked like. The door creaked open. Miller looked up. It was Jamal. Taller now, broader, his presence commanding. He had come back to Fairview for a visit, to see his mother, to speak at a community event. And now, he stood in the doorway of the gym that had once caged him. For a long moment neither spoke. Finally Miller cleared his throat. "You became everything I didn't believe you could be." Jamal's gaze was steady. "I became everything I always knew I could be." The words were simple but they cut deep. Miller's shoulders sagged. "I was wrong. About you. About a lot of things." Silence hung heavy. Jamal dribbled a ball he had brought with him, the sound echoing in the empty gym. Then he said, "You didn't just bench me, coach. You benched yourself. You could have been part of my story. But instead, you're just the lesson." Miller's throat tightened, tears burning at the edges of his eyes. For the first time in decades, he felt stripped bare. And Jamal. He turned and walked away, his footsteps strong, his head high. The sound lingered in Miller's ears long after he was gone. Miller sat in the quiet gym long after Jamal had left, the echoes of his footsteps fading like a drumbeat of judgment. The boy's words played over and over in his mind. "You benched yourself. You could have been part of my story. But instead you're just the lesson." It was the most honest truth anyone had ever spoken to him, and it left him hollow. For decades, he had believed he was shaping boys into men, preparing them for life. But now, in the twilight of his career, he saw that he had allowed his own prejudice to poison the very thing he claimed to love. He buried his face in his hands. For the first time in his life, Coach Miller wept. Days later, Jamal stood before a packed auditorium at Fairview High. The school had invited him back as a guest speaker, to inspire students with his story. He wore a sharp suit, his shoulders broad, his presence commanding. Angela sat in the front row, pride radiating from her smile. Jamal began softly, his voice carrying warmth and strength. "When I was a boy in this very gym, I had a dream. But for a long time that dream was held hostage. Not by my lack of talent, not by my work ethic, but by something harder to fight. Prejudice. A system that told me I didn't belong." Students leaned in, hanging on his every word. Teachers nodded. Parents listened with heavy hearts. He continued, There will be people who look at you and see less than what you are. They'll try to shrink you, to silence you, to keep you on the bench. But you have to know your worth before anyone else does. You have to play your game even when nobody's watching. Because one day, the world will have no choice but to see you. Applause thundered through the room. In the back, hidden in the shadows, Miller listened. He hadn't been invited. He had slipped in quietly, hoping no one would notice. As Jamal spoke, guilt twisted deeper. He had been the wall Jamal fought to climb, and though the boy had soared beyond him, Miller knew he had nearly destroyed him. When the speech ended, students swarmed Jamal, shaking his hand, asking questions, snapping photos. He laughed warmly, humble despite his status. Miller stood frozen, unsure if he should approach. Finally, as the crowd thinned, he forced himself forward. "Jamal," he said quietly. Jamal turned. For a moment, his eyes hardened, remembering every sting of humiliation, every moment of invisibility. But then he saw something different in Miller's face, something he had never seen before. Vulnerability. Regret. Miller swallowed. "I came to say, sorry. For everything." The words were raw, shaky, almost broken. Jamal studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded. "You don't owe me an apology, coach. You owe it to every kid who's still sitting on the bench right now, wondering if they're not enough. Don't let them go through what I did." The statement pierced deeper than forgiveness. It was a charge, a command, a truth Miller would never escape. Jamal extended his hand. Miller hesitated, then shook it. His grip trembled. "Thank you," Miller whispered. Jamal's eyes softened slightly. "You still have time to be better. Don't waste it." With that, Jamal turned away, drawn back into the crowd of students who adored him. Miller stood there, small and humbled, realizing he had been given a second chance, not to rewrite the past, but to redeem what little of the future he still held. In the weeks that followed, Miller changed. He began opening his practices, watching every boy with fresh eyes, searching for hidden sparks instead of reasons to doubt. He stopped dismissing players based on where they came from, how they looked, or what he assumed they could do. He started coaching like a teacher again, not a gatekeeper. And though he could never erase the harm he had caused, he lived with Jamal's words as his compass. "You owe it to the ones still on the bench." Meanwhile, Jamal's journey soared. He earned his scholarship, playing under bright lights in college arenas. His name broadcast on national TV. He became more than just an athlete. He became a voice, a symbol of resilience, of triumph over injustice. Angela traveled often, sitting proudly in the stands, tears of joy shining in her eyes as she watched her son live out the promise he had made so long ago. Years later, Jamal would go on to play professionally, his story inspiring countless young athletes. But no matter how high he climbed, he never forgot Fairview, the gym where his dream had been caged, the town where he had been benched, and the lesson he had carved out of pain. And in Fairview, Coach Miller retired quietly. His legacy was no longer the championships he once boasted about, but the lesson he embodied: that prejudice can blind even the most seasoned, that regret comes too late, and that greatness cannot be held down forever. He would tell anyone who asked that the greatest player he ever coached was Jamal Carter. But deep down he knew the truth. Jamal had become great not because of him, but in spite of him. And that truth was both his punishment and his redemption. And that's where Jamal's story leaves us, with triumph, pain, and a powerful reminder. No matter how hard people try to hold you back, your light will shine if you refuse to give up. If this story moved you, don't just let it end here. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that dig deep into prejudice, redemption, and the strength of the human spirit. Share this with someone who needs hope right now, because stories like this are more than entertainment. They're a mirror showing us who we are and who we can become. So hit that subscribe button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and remember, sometimes the ones who try to bench you are the very people who will regret it the most when you rise.